It was the great Socrates who told us that the greatest good is knowledge and the greatest evil is ignorance. Now, how does this pair up with the wise words of Solomon from the ancient Jewish scriptures? When we begin to think about where does our paradigm start? Where does our framework start? Where does our perspective begin? It was the great Solomon, of course, in his epic writing Proverbs, chapter 1, verse 7, who wrote the famous line, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge." Now remember, this is commonly misquoted saying that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Although that may be true, this is not what he writes in this specific verse. He says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge." Now, how is it that the beginning, the start, the first thing you have to do is have a fear of the Lord in order to know something? How is that true? Now, with Socrates, when he said that the greatest good is knowledge, he must have had some sort of context to that statement if he also said that the greatest evil is ignorance. He must be having an idea above these two, judging these two ideas, that what good is definitionally and what evil is definitionally is something very, very different, and they must all come from a central premise that guides and governs these two concepts. The idea of knowledge has to take into account the idea of right knowledge and incorrect knowledge. Knowledge for the wrong sake and knowledge for the right sake. Because if I know a fact, my intent on why I know that fact and my intent on how I'm going to use that fact traditionally will always matter from the impact of the world. But philosophically and internally, we know that matters to who I am as a person. My intent, the why behind my actions, the why behind my thinking is what really matters, the Jewish scriptures go on to say. Now, if the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, we must understand that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of right knowledge, functioning knowledge, knowledge that leaves us out of the area of ignorance, as Solomon goes on to tell us, which is interesting because Solomon predates Socrates, but Socrates mimics Solomon's chapter 1 and chapter 2 of Proverbs. This is highly interesting why Socrates in approximately 375 BC would go back several hundred years and basically give a summation on why this is correct. So right knowledge is really what we're after. Right knowledge with the right intent. I believe it was Drucker that said that knowledge is useless unless it's followed up by action. What he's really saying here is that if all you have is knowledge and you have no intent to execute on that knowledge, you have a potentiality problem, that you are only potential, you're nothing concrete. It's only whenever you act that you have a life that is something of worth and something of concreteness. Without the action, the knowledge is worthless. Secondly, that must also mean that if you have an idea of right knowledge, you must also have this idea that right knowledge must carry with it the idea that you, and the intention that you will act on it in the future. That if you have the right knowledge, you will act on it. Now, this is moving forward in the thought system, not backwards. We're talking about the source of right action is right knowledge. But now Solomon has this idea that even before that, the precursor to right knowledge is the fear of the Lord. What he's saying here is that there's perspective that we must somehow fear the Lord. Why would that be? I would present to your consideration, that it would be because it is necessary for us to have the right perspective of who we are in relation to who God is. And without knowing who we are, without knowing who God is, we can never understand. We have to be able to plug in the knowledge within a central organizing system that allows it to cascade and to flow in proper order and proper connection. Because if I think of myself as God, if I think of myself as my own determinant, if I think of myself as the one who everything revolves around, I am the Truman in the Truman Show, then my knowledge will be bastardized, it will be non-factual, it will be irrelevant, and therefore it will be complete ignorance of what the truth is. You're looking for a truth, and you're also looking for a pathway to the truth that then eventually leads into action. And so we have to start with the premise that we are man, that there is a higher authority above us and beyond us, and that our knowledge is for us to act and to effectuate our powers, effectuate our desires, effectuate our love out into the world as we lead organizations, we lead families, we lead all sorts of different socioeconomic and political groups as leaders. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. We must have the proper perspective, and only through the proper perspective can we have the right knowledge and therefore have the right action that stems from that knowledge. We must put ourselves in the proper framework in order to effectuate change out in the world.